Yeah, so just a little background on this before Trey kind of goes over the details. This is an NSF ATE project that was awarded a few years ago. And the premise of the whole thing was to basically create hands-on activities that could be done, relating to nanofabrication, nanotechnology, semiconductor manufacturing processes. But these are processes that could be done in a very, very affordable way, pretty much as affordable as possible, but retaining a hands-on component. There really hadn't, there's been other things like that in the past that we've seen, but we wanted to kind of take everything and put it into a condensed manual and hit all the key things in manufacturing. So vacuum, deposition, etch, patterns. So that's what this is. And as ultimately, as Trey will get into, we've developed these 10 experiments, which can cover that whole gambit of activities. And the key here is you do not need a subject matter expert to do these. So this is something that could be plug and play for a high school instructor, like a physics instructor, a chemistry instructor, where the instructions are detailed enough where they could run a hands-on photolithography experiment in their physics lab, for example, to teach that at the high school level with no special equipment, no special labs. And Trey's going to kind of get into the details of how we did all this, but that's kind of what this was born out of. The grant is sunsetting, but we are planning on probably applying for a renewal next year. But what we're going to go through today is kind of close to the finished product of this manual. So Trey, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, sir. Just to reintroduce myself, my name is Trey Shirley, and I just want to do a real quick confirmation. You all can see the presentation, right?
Yes, sir.
Got it. All right. So today I'm going to be talking about the low-cost nanotechnology lab manual. So the first thing to obviously kind of talk again about what Zach said is nanotechnology education is incredibly expensive. So we have two main types of options that we have for hands-on education, right? Or rather nanotechnology education in general. Either we can remove the hands-on component, which is not great as many of these industries that we are sending students into seek that hands-on skill and practical experience. With the second option being acquiring significant funding to create your own clean room facility, which I'm sure as many of you are already aware at this point, acquiring that level of funding on top of actually building your facility is prohibitive for a multitude of different institutions. So the third option is effectively to maintain that hands-on component without the equipment and without the infrastructure, and on top of that, without significant cost to the end user. So we would be able to engage students and teachers with the same concepts that we would teach in a clean room, but without having to have that equipment or those facilities. So, and that's where the low cost nanotechnology lab manual comes in, where these are 10 hands-on labs for under $10,000 total. And I do want to kind of focus on the fact that this lab manual in and of itself is not $10,000. You're not paying $10,000 to access this information. This manual is entirely free. I'll be providing a link and a QR code to our website where you'll be able to access all this information for obviously completely free. The $10,000 number is specifically for the materials that you will need to do all 10 hands-on labs. And we'll go into it here in a minute, but these can also be done piecemeal if that's desired as well, where you can choose to do 2, 3, 4 labs and ignore the other 6. It all depends on what exactly you'd like to do with your facility or with your resources or your students. So a lot of the key materials and key technologies that are covered in this are all very conducive to nanotechnology, mainly focusing on the building blocks, so to speak, of nanotechnology. So going into clean rooms, vacuum science, plasma technology, pattern transfer, deposition, etch, and material synthesis. Basically, what we consider to be the absolute basics of nanotechnology. What is a clean room? Why is a clean room important? What are vacuums? How do we utilize vacuums? Plasma technology, transferring patterns, so on and so forth. So one thing that we can focus on specifically is going to be pattern transfer, or more colloquially known as lithography. And in order to teach lithography in a normal or typical way, where we would have it in a clean room facility or even any type of facility, you'd be looking at tens of thousands of dollars just for a spin bench in and of itself, tens of thousands of dollars for developer benches, exposure systems for hundreds of thousands, and then materials for thousands of dollars. Obviously, not conducive to a high school or community college environment where budgets are incredibly constrained. And once again, these numbers only go towards the equipment themselves. That doesn't go towards the expertise or the subject matter experts that are required to not only, teach the material utilizing these pieces of equipment, but also to maintain the pieces of equipment as I'm sure you guys are all aware, managing your own labs, if it moves, it's going to break. So anytime that goes down in the middle of a summer program like what we have, if we lose a piece of equipment, you're now losing teaching time, you're losing the ability to teach students, and you're basically losing money. So conversely, what we can do in a low cost method is quite literally do the exact same thing that we do in a regular teaching clean room or a regular clean room in general and do it for under $200 utilizing materials that you can acquire at your everyday drugstore. So you can go into your average drugstore and find gel nail polish, a UV curing lamp, as well as go into your IT department, find a computer fan and just a handful of things off of Amazon, and you can do the entire lithography process about as one-to-one as you can possibly get for under $200. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail here in a minute. And this is consistent across pretty much every process that we have in here. Some are a little bit closer to the source material than others, but generally we try to keep it as close to the material as possible. All of these labs are basically self-contained. So everything in here, you can basically hand your students the lab manual with the materials that they will require, and it has everything you could possibly need from the pre-lab reading to the background, basically talking about what is this technology, why is it important, what is it used for, the science behind it, so on and so forth. Then going into the experiment itself, pattern transfer, how do we walk through that process, even having post-lab questions where you will obviously be able to access a TA doc, as we refer to them, or a teacher or instructor's copy, where you already have the answers fully answered for you, and all you have to do is just back check and grade your students' answers, as well as in some cases even supplemental activities. So for pattern transfer, there are a handful of supplemental activities that you can use to pad out your time. So a lot of these labs are designed around the 50-minute high school period. However, some labs have additional stuff in there to where either you can run multiple of the same lab, or you can even run at a community college 2-hour lab slot where you can fill out that entire 2 hours with one of these labs. So we can go into specifically what these labs are. So lab one is just introducing clean rooms. What is a clean room? Why are they important? Why do we have particles? Or rather, why do we have to avoid these particles? So this is one of Zach's favorites. He quite enjoys the fact that I was able to make what is basically a class 10,000 clean room inside of a cardboard box. So there's two different sections of this lab. One, there's basically an air simulator where you take some sawdust inside of a cardboard box and put some cellophane tape over top of it, shine a flashlight into the side, you shake up that box, and you can see the particles flying everywhere. Very simple, very easy, but a very effective way to show students, this is what average air looks like basically at the nano scale. And then conversely, you can also go and build an entire clean room. So this is just a office paper box with a smaller cardboard box on the inside with a 9-volt fan, or a computer fan powered by a 9-volt battery that pushes that air down and actually cycles the particles out of that interior room, just like our class 10,000 we have here at CNEU in University Park. And this is only going to be about $20. And that $20 is basically going to be the flashlight that you see signing there. Everything else can be acquired around your facility. The second one is going to be vacuum assembly. So this is going to be the most expensive lab that we have, and that's obviously going to be because of the vac trainer. We've worked with Kurt J. Lesker Company to design this vac trainer. It is the lowest cost mass-produced trainer on the market currently. And basically this entire lab is taking it out of the box, putting it together, testing it, and making sure that it works properly. So we've conducted basically an entire 50 minutes to putting this together and making sure that it works properly, as well as teaching all of those fundamental skills that come along with vac assembly. And then once you get it put together, we start talking about vacuum concepts, mean free path, vapor pressure, things such as that. I prefer to call these the vacuum magic tricks, because I utilize this one specifically a lot for outreach, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But students, for some reason, love this stuff. So simple things that are not really all that interesting for us. Obviously we know as individuals who work with this type of technology that if you put water under a vacuum, even at room temperature, it's going to boil. If I put incense in here and I light it and let it get all smoky and everything and turn on the vacuum, it's going to pull all that out. But for somebody who doesn't consistently work with this is very interesting for them to see, and they consistently love it. And then we can go into plasma technologies. This is another one that I use for outreach a lot, and this is always my closer. The students absolutely love this because effectively all I do is I swap out that bell jar in the vac trainer for a vacuum hose. I take a vacuum flask, hook it up, pump it down to around 60 millitorr or so. I take it and I throw it in your average everyday microwave. You can do this with your own break room microwave if you want. Wouldn't recommend it, but you can. throw it in there and you turn it on. You have to make sure you put it in the specific spot where the RF energy is greatest, but you can spark a high energy plasma in your everyday microwave. Students love it. It's bright. It's brilliant. It's the showstopper basically. We also have evaporation where we simulate thermal evaporation utilizing some wax beads and some just a regular everyday mug warmer. You put everything in there, let it run for about 20 minutes or so, and you can actually see a deposition onto a glass slide that you have above that, as well as, photolithography, which is basically my preferred. This is my favorite. This is probably my best work, where I've created the lithography process for under $200, utilizing things like I said, you can find in a average everyday drugstore. Starting with literally creating your own photoresist, building your spin coater, spinning it, exposing it, building your own mask. Students really enjoy this as they get to be creative. We've had students, make the bat symbol and a whole bunch of other things utilizing these masks that they build themselves. Once again, it's great for outreach. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit. And then going from there, we go into wet etching, where we just use some ferric chloride and some Sharpie on what is basically just a aluminum food covering you can get from Dollar Tree. You can etch that away a little bit, and obviously you can see that whatever your sacrificial layer is protecting obviously is saved, so you can transfer the pattern. And on that note, we also have pattern transfer and processing. So basically you combine the previous two labs onto a 2-inch aluminum disc, which is basically synonymous with a 2-inch silicon wafer. You run through this process, you have your photoresist layer, you put it into ferric chloride, heat it up, let it run for a little bit, and you can basically etch away everything except for what is covered by that photoresist layer, allowing you to basically do everything that you just did previously. And once again, these are all building off of each other. So the lab cost may be $300, but this is $300 if you haven't already purchased everything prior. So I tried to save as much money as possible by combining labs and basically building labs out of things that you can readily and easily access in your facility. And then finally, we have electro deposition and layer by layer gold nanoparticle deposition. These were actually made up by our partner, Amy Zinn. So these are obviously focusing on the fundamentals of electroplating, as well as, working with layer by layer deposition of gold nanoparticles, where students will actually get to make their own gold nanoparticles and put them down on a glass slide. And you can actually see as you put it down layer by layer, you start with basically clear deposition, and then you move into that purple color, and then you eventually see gold depending on how many times you do it. Once again, it's very good to talk about, how things at the nanoscale don't necessarily work at the macro scale that we're used to. Gold at the nanoscale is purple or red, depending on its size, versus the gold that we are used to. So I've mentioned a few times already the importance of outreach, or we're going to be talking about outreach. And that's mainly because the fact that students are not generally aware of nanotechnology as a career or even as a field. They understand, their phones are powered by chips. They understand sometimes what a transistor is, but generally they don't understand how these things come to fruition. So as part of my PhD, whenever I go out and I do my outreach, I've actually been grabbing some data off of these students to try to understand how important is this outreach? And the general answer is very important, because as you can see, here's two different schools. We have Ferndale on the top and we have Upper Dauphin area on the bottom. So generally, first of all, students are just not aware of the career path at all. So this is a fair amount of data points that I got where the students just did not know that this field even existed in the first place. And then once they were actually informed about it, they did actually have an increase in their interest in the field. Now, it's not insane in a lot of cases where their interest is, incredibly peaked, but generally giving them the information to work with is essential to them actually being able to open up their eyes and going into this field further. On top of that, I also do demonstrations with a lot of the stuff that we bring in. So for example, like I said, I bring in the vacuum trainer where I put it together and I'll show them, pumping things down, boiling water at room temperature, lighting incense and showing the mean free path. And obviously, like I said, plasma, where students are very much engaged with the content that I've already presented to them. So I precede this all with a quick presentation on nanotechnology. What is it? Why is it important? What do I do? Things like that. And then I show them the science right there in front of them, just following it right up. And we can do this with a multitude of different class sizes. So I've done this with as little as 5 students to up to 500 students I presented in front of. And these students generally, once again, are not aware of this field at all. So getting out in front of these students and showing them these types of career options and all the different cool things that you can do. I even have a slide dedicated to my presentation where I even work through getting an image on a scanning electron microscope where I start with just a zoomed out blurry image of a tick and we work our way all the way up to about 600,000 times magnification and talking about how we go through all these magnification levels, how we adjust our focus, how we adjust our stignators, so on and so forth to get down to that 600,000 times magnification. And students, you can see, are generally very engaged with this information as you're presenting it. So with these low-cost experiments and with these low-cost applications, you can take these wherever you want. So basically, in the past, what I've done is basically take it, put everything I need into basically these office paper boxes. I apologize, the word slipped my mind. Um, all you're doing is just packing it all up, taking it with you. You can throw it into your car, very easily transported, and wherever you go, you give your presentation, and you can immediately turn around and do something hands-on, like you can see here, where students are getting their hands on this lithography experiment and actually going through and doing it themselves after being presented and talked to about lithography and the applications of it in real nanotechnology. I've also done this with a multitude of other classes as well, where students are very engaged. We talk about it. And to kind of speak to Zach's point that he mentioned earlier, where you don't necessarily have to have a background in nanotechnology to do these things. I don't know if you can really see them, but this lady right here, and I believe her husband might be somewhere else. Um, they have no experience in nanotechnology. They had no idea what the lithography experiment was, but I did my presentation, I did my vacuum demonstrations, and I had about 50 minutes left of the time that I had with these students here. And I was very cautious as to the idea of trying to do this lithography experiment with such few hands to my name, basically. And both of them jumped in, offered to help. And within 5 minutes, I had them prepped and ready to go on what they needed to do. And we were able to get through this entire experiment in less than 50 minutes with two individuals who had no idea what lithography was 2 hours prior. So this is something that can be picked up by anybody who has a physics background or a chemistry background, or honestly, if you ask me, even a shop background, where if you have hands-on skill working with any type of equipment or working with your hands, any type of hand tool, this is going to come very naturally to you because it's not taking anything outside of what you're already experienced with. It's just taking things that you already know and using them in a different context. So I have my LCN manual link here to basically talk about, if you guys are interested in looking further into the manual and possibly even using it in your own regards, you guys are welcome to it. But with that, any questions?